just want to note that my hotel, which is called Brown Hotel, in Ammonia Square, is like a straight shot to the Acropolis. I asked the guy at the front door, I'm like, what's the best way to the Acropolis from here? And he was like, you don't need Google Maps, just go around the corner and just straight. He's like, you'll see the Acropolis Hill. So it's just basically a perfect location in downtown Athens. It's really cool, and although the weather is somewhat unpleasant, the walk to the Acropolis is really, really nice. I guess a little rain gives it some character. Not that Athens needs any more character. This is a city of character and a city filled with characters. Monastiraki Square, bustling as always, even in the rain. And it's a nice little dash of chaos on the approach to the Acropolis, which is in the hill way up there. I love that you exit the square and then you're suddenly on this extremely quiet little side street. The noise contrasts in Athens are really something. Maybe the rain is kind of a blessing in disguise. The tables here are normally filled with tourists, and today there's like nobody on the approach to Acropolis Hill. I'm kind of liking this. This is sort of my vibe here, actually. And there's plenty of art along the way. Oh yeah. See, this is perfect. There's almost nobody here. Maybe a different story once I get up there, but... And it's a little good exercise on the way. It seems that the Acropolis, thankfully, has switched to summer hours. Part of why I missed it when I was here a few months ago, earlier in the series, was that it closed, I think, at 5:30, and I'd gotten here at like 5:32 or something ridiculous. Now it says it closes at 7:30, and a ticket, it's a bit pricey, it is 20 euros, which I think is a good bit more than I paid when I was last really here in 2019. I think it's like, I don't know, it seems like it's much, much more. But I'm happy to be here, so I'm definitely not complaining. I've been waiting for what seems like hundreds of people to leave to try and get a clear shot, but it's not going to happen. I'm just entering through the west gate before the Propylaea, which is the grand entrance to the Acropolis. And up here is the tiny little temple of Athena Nike. Athena as in Athens. And if you crane your neck way up, the GoPro doesn't really do it justice. But you can see there are marbles at the top that depict, the lighting's not very good either, but they depict the Battle of Marathon with the Persians, which is what actually kind of united the tribes of Greece, was the common enemy in Persia. And this is like, I just think it's cool. I love that it just kind of, it's on this little like outcrop thing before entering Propylaea and entering really the inner sanctum of the Acropolis. Unfortunately, the temple is off limits, but I can crane the GoPro up there just a little bit to get a little better look at it. It seems like having this temple here, and even the way that it's kind of diagonally pointing in that direction, sort of like above the approach to the Acropolis and the gate. It's like it seems like a signal that this is a place for Athena. The grandeur of the Propylaea Gate is astounding. Oh, so many of the tourists left due to the rain, and now it's stopped raining. Oh, this is so awesome. In the actual literal use of the word awesome, and the literal use of the word literal. Wow. So happy to be back here. One thing that's captivating about not only the Parthenon and the Acropolis as a whole is that it's like a site of politics. It is a site of what I'm guessing is religious sanctuary. It has a military advantage in that it has a 360-degree view above Athens. So it's kind of a lot of things all rolled into one. I feel like every time I've ever visited this site, it's in some sort of perpetual refurbishment. And this time, it's particularly egregious in that there's a giant crane in the middle of the temple. I feel like since the first time I came here 25 years ago, there is always something going on. You know, it's in a way, the Parthenon tells the story of Athena and the rise of Athens and the unification of ancient Greece. But it also tells a story of modern Greece in just the kind of the chaos that the temple lay in, and all the tweaks that are being made, and how, I don't know, kind of ad hoc it all appears. They've also, since I was last here a few years ago, they have concreted the ground, which I'm not necessarily thrilled about in terms of authenticity. So it's a lot more, I guess you could say, to use the urban language of today, the Parthenon is a bit gentrified when compared to Jerash and Baalbek and some of the sites that I visited in earlier episodes of this series. When we think of the Acropolis today, we think of the monumental ancient structures of the Acropolis, most notably, obviously, the Parthenon. But it's my understanding that the Acropolis actually existed long before this incarnation. And basically, this was built by Pericles after the war with the Persians. So this was like a re-establishment of Athenian culture, dedicated, where everything was basically dedicated to Athena, and it also signified the recovery of Athens after the war, which lasted something like 15 years, it was thought to be. So the Acropolis is basically far older than how we see it today with our eyes of the present. I think it was, my guess is that it was primarily a religious sanctuary in the sort of, I'll call it the pre-ancient period. I mean, this was built over 2,500 years ago now. And I'm wondering what existed here before this. That is a really interesting question. I don't have the answer. I love some of the funkier details of this site, like this little sort of railroad track, which I'm guessing this was built at some point to essentially move these stones for some project that was possibly never finished. I don't know. I'd be interested to know actually the history of the railroad. Here, there's just a random shattered cannon. I like all the kind of the odds and ends of the place. I like how it seems like there are certain projects of basically a reconstructive nature that went unfinished and then, they were just sort of abandoned as ideas, and then essentially other new projects were started. And there's definitely a lot more going on here than the last time I was here. Oh, also, the view, which, you know, you normally see Athens on a, you know, you think of brilliant blue sky and snow white clouds and, you know, all that. And this view is actually really cool. It shows how rich the landscape is. It kind of looks like the Black Sea, especially when you see the Mediterranean there way off in the distance. I'm actually kind of stoked on this weather. It's cool. It's cool. It's very, you know, it's the colors are just really, I don't know, really like verdant. Everything is like the foliage is very green, and the buildings seem more gray, white, and red and yellow. I think it's pretty much always been the case that on any given day, a large portion of the Parthenon is obstructed by like sort of hideous, what are meant to be temporary buildings for its reconstruction. One thing I want to mention before I forget, because I actually don't have all that much time. I've got to walk back to the hotel and get on the metro and go back to the airport. But the name Parthenon comes from Parthenos, which is an ancient Greek term meaning like virginity, or might be synonymous with purity. And that had to do with the nature of Athena and the rebirth of this city after it was sacked by the Persians. And essentially, Athena was meant to stay chaste and stay pure in order to kind of symbolize the rebirth and the renewal of Athens after this long conflict with the soldiers of ancient Iran. The Parthenon remains the absolute pinnacle of Doric architecture. It's almost an homage to the Doric period as it is to Athena. The Acropolis is home to temples and structures that are from different periods as well. So I was mentioning that the Parthenon is the sort of pinnacle of the Doric period, and here we have the Erechtheion, which is from the Ionic period. The legend of the Erechtheion is that this is where Poseidon and Athena had basically a contest of wills to see who would be the patron god of what is today the capital of modern Greece. Obviously, we can infer that Athena won, and Poseidon was supposedly absolutely furious that he did not become the principal god of Athens. This is an utter visual cliche, but here is a totally scruffy cat. Before the ancient period, there was the archaic period here in the Acropolis. And what looked like a bunch of just stone blocks kind of laying about here are actually the remnants of the temple of what is known as Old Athena. And this temple was destroyed in the war with the Persians before the Acropolis was re-erected by Pericles. And these stones also symbolize the transition from tyranny to democracy in the ancient Hellenic world. So it was here at the Acropolis that the transition from tyranny to democracy really basically changed the world and became a model for the consensus building societies that we have today in much of the world, although they are seemingly increasingly under threat, even in the very heart of the West. On the backside of the Erechtheion, there was the Petrosion, which doesn't really exist today, but here is where it was thought to be the sacred olive tree. This was a really important part of the archaic part of Athens, and this olive tree apparently was planted sometime in the early 20th century as kind of just a bit of symbolism about the rebirth of Athens at that time. Although, of course, as I mentioned, Lord Elgin was pillaging some of the best artifacts from the Acropolis. But this olive tree is cool, and it is it's quite picturesque. So there seems to be some effort here to organize the stones, but because the archaeological record has sort of gaps in it, we don't know which stones came from where over time. And so here they appear to be trying to organize them by kind, but I don't think anyone really knows what to do with them. So they just sort of, in this area, seem to be sitting in sort of cool, like, neat piles. But I mean, is there any prospect of actually trying to rebuild a temple with these? I don't really see how that could be done. One of the principal images, not only of Athens, but of ancient Greece, are the caryatids, or the maidens, on the side of the Erechtheion. But disappointingly, these are actually copies. So the real caryatids, I guess they shouldn't be outside, are in the Acropolis Museum. And of course, Lord Elgin, the infamous Lord Elgin of the Elgin marbles at the British Museum in London, he pilfered one of them. If you think about the Acropolis, it would be incongruous if these caryatids were actually real, because there aren't any other statues here. There are just temples and buildings. There aren't much of the art and sculpture is long gone. So these are sort of replaced copies in a reconstructed Erechtheion. These 3 blocks here between the Propylaea and the Erechtheion were the base of the giant statue of the goddess Athena that greeted visitors to the sanctuary. Here is described that the giant statue of the ancient goddess was carted off to Constantinople, where it was later destroyed by the Franks. Just a quick fun fact, the Propylaea here was the inspiration for the Brandenburg Gate. I think that is pretty cool just in and of itself. Here, I'm just using this Ionic column as an example, but you can see how it's been reconstructed over time, because all of these sections are sort of put together, and a lot of the stone looks like it's from different eras, and you can see different patterns of weathering and more sharp edges and ridges. There is a whole history within the history here of things being built and rebuilt. And apparently, one thing I read is that some of the reconstruction efforts that are going on now are meant to rectify mistakes that were made in cruder past reconstruction efforts in the 20th century and even in the 19th century. So there's a whole plan now of basically undoing the old fix-up projects, essentially, to put it crudely. I've always been curious what this giant, solid, column-like structure is. I've never read exactly what this is. If anybody knows, please leave something in the comments below. I would love to get some insight into the vast gaps in my own knowledge about some of the nuances of the Acropolis. But this thing, it is freaking huge, and it's completely solid. So it's not a temple, and obviously it's not a column in the Ionic or the Doric sense. Just really wonder what the heck this thing is. I'd love if I have any Greek subscribers to tell me, some more of the rich details that I can't know just from a cursory visit on basically what's a 24-hour layover. I have to say, although this was a shorter visit to the site than I would have ideally liked, it does give me a bit of closure from not being able to really get inside in episode 3, if anybody watched that one when I first started these vlogs. So I'm pretty happy, actually, all things considered. I mean, the weather's not ideal, but I overheard a tour guide telling some people that he said, well, be thankful that it's overcast. He said, otherwise there'd be like over 1,000 people here instead of just 100 or 150 or however many people were up on the site today. just to get an overview of the entire Acropolis. Here you have the Temple of Athena Nike, the Propylaea Gate, and you can see part of the Erechtheion. And this also gives you the sort of perspective of how steep and how radically sharp the Acropolis is. It's basically like an escarpment that juts out of the very center of the city. It's pretty radical in how vertical it is. Leaving the site, it's like you're exiting a fantasy. And behind me, you can hear the bells of an Orthodox church, and it's like you're back into the present. It's almost like time traveling from the world of the ancient Greek religion to that of present-day Greek Orthodoxy. And Athens is so much more than just the Acropolis, obviously. Here, just beside this restaurant on one of the hills on the way up, there is this part of what is known as the ancient agora, and they're just old stone blocks everywhere, and it's all overgrown with weeds. It looks like some of it's been hit with a weed whacker, but I mean, you realize so many of the ruins in this city aren't really properly preserved. It's like there is, you know, the Roman agora, there is the Acropolis, there are certain sites here that are very well kept, relatively, you know, taken care of and so forth. But there's a lot that's just like, I mean, this essentially looks like a vacant lot. Thanks for watching, and if you like this content, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe for future episodes.